Okay guys, I'm looking at a slightly different topic here. From my background, I'm a geography teacher, and my undergraduate degree was looking at a sense of place amongst women expatriates in Hong Kong. I interviewed 10 women who had moved out there, international women, and kind of looked at their experience of home and how that kind of connected them to Hong Kong as a place. So I already had a little bit of an experience of looking at gender-related issues there. My educational experience, I completed my PGCE 2 years ago, and I was in 2 different mixed ability schools with, which were co-educational. And last year, for my NQT year, I was in an all-girls academy, and then this September, I'm in an all-boys independent school. So I've kind of flitted about a bit and seen a sort of, in a short period of time, a variety of different schools. And that comes with its sort of limitations, in a sense that I don't necessarily know the setup of the school as well as I could do had I been there for a couple of years. But it's also kind of brought to me issues that I don't think I've ever really considered before. And partly when you're conducting something as big as a sort of a master's thesis, you want to do something that you're interested in, and also relevant to the context. Thinking about scale and the discussions we had in the other room there, and on a local scale, I felt that this could be a potential issue in the school I'm currently in. And internationally or nationally, perhaps other single-sex schools might be looking at this as a particular, say, social barriers in response to predominantly male staff or female staff, or perhaps looking at gender in the workplace if we were to transfer that out of education. So when I first started at the school in September, I was kind of made aware of the fact that I was in the minority, and that the boys might bring with them some sort of preconceptions of what female staff might be like and what it might be like to teach there. And I suppose I was a bit apprehensive, having never been in an all-boys environment, as to how they were going to cope with me, and also relatively new to teaching as well. But one of the sort of more established members of staff said, as long as you're professional and you treat them, you act as a professional classroom, they will treat you as such. And actually I've had a very sort of positive experience. What has come to light are some other issues about sort of building rapport. Young female teacher going into an all-girls school, we could immediately chat about things that I couldn't necessarily have the same with boys. And sort of stereotypically they might have been into sport, but also they're not also really sure how to cope with a female member of staff straight away. They're still trying to figure you out. And now I've had a very pleasant experience, but I wondered whether other sort of female members of the staff room were feeling this sort of having any struggles or social barriers to being in an male-dominated environment. And the other thing is that there are no female senior leadership team members, there are no female pastoral leaders, and predominantly female staff are part-time. So that has had an impact, and I'm just going to explore a couple of those issues in this presentation. So just to give you a bit of a background of my school, it was established in the 16th century, it's traditional, it's been there a long time. We have 750 boys, roughly. It is a boarding school, and predominantly used to be a boarding school all the way through. It's aged from, the boys start at 13, goes up to 18, and now we have got a day element in there. There's about 450 boarders, 300 day boys. So there is a sort of added element, the fact that they might be sort of challenged at home, they interact with their sisters and things like that. A heavily male-dominated staff body. There's only 12 women out of a possible sort of 112 teaching staff. The issue's quite topical, I thought, in politics as well. Sort of Donald Trump sort of throwaway comments and things. I thought perhaps gender is still very much a topical issue. And in the light of International Women's Day, the boys were sort of saying, using the word feminism in quite a sort of disparaging way. So I kind of wanted to challenge that a little bit. And it turns out, in my interviews, that actually male members of staff are quite keen to challenge you in these particular issues, and the boys respond quite well to that. But they get a bit more confrontational when a woman, maybe because they think we're the epitome of feminism, we're all feminists, that they get a bit confrontational as to why are certain points of view. And I think they've probably had it sort of in their face a little bit, and they're not quite sure exactly what feminism entails and equality. Now, as much as I would have loved to have spoken to the boys about that issue, about sort of their perceptions, in light of the scale of the project and the ethical considerations, I decided to look at the staff perception of the female teacher. And through that, some of the boys' considerations and perceptions have come through that, based on their experiences. So, moving on to my research questions. First of all, I'm looking at how are female staff perceived by male colleagues and management, particularly as some have described there being a glass ceiling for female members of staff to get to that sort of leadership and management role on stage. What challenges and difficulties do female staff experience working in a boys' school? To what extent can the challenging of attitudes and practice around gender lead to successful cultural change in the school? And this is quite an interesting one because although I'm looking at with a sort of a feminism or feminist lens, actually there are other cultural issues at play here, sort of the terminology that the boys use and how you might challenge that. Incorporating mindfulness in schools, how difficult that was to instill a culture for everyone, both boys and staff, to get on board with that. And this is just one of the issues that could be researched within this environment. So just a bit of a background of the literature. It's actually been quite challenging to find some literature based on this, particularly as it emphasises a lot between the gender gap between boys and girls at different stages of education, which you guys were actually referring to, which is great. I've focused a little bit more on the tradition of sort of men being in leadership roles in a profession, which particularly at primary level, maybe not so much secondary level. And I need to find some statistics to actually sort of back this up properly. I'm aware that this isn't necessarily watertight. I'm still in the stages of sort of going through all the literature, but predominantly perceived to be, or historically, a female sort of a female kind of profession, as it were. And actually, in light of the statistics, it shows that actually there are more sort of men in leadership roles than there might be, say females. I'm aware that actually in this particular context there are no female members of staff, and I've obviously got a distorted view because I'm just looking at this particular school, and that might not be reflective nationally, but it was just an interesting issue to kind of consider. Paths of progression are quite different for men and women, depending on who's the primary carer as well, and historically that has always been sort of the mother, although not in every situation now, and it'd be interesting to see how the school deals with that at a later date, introducing shared parental leave policy, as the law states. I'm going to talk a little bit about how they've been support for women in this environment, for instance, a sort of above statutory maternity package to try and make sure that we can retain women in this environment, because they're obviously struggling to either stay or to kind of progress. I mentioned earlier that of those 12 women in the staff room, there are only 5 full-time members of staff. And when we say sort of 5 full-time, that means that we're working all in school like this. It comes with a commitment of 2 terms of sport, as well as your teaching, and Saturday school, and you might be assigned to either a boarding or a day house. And if you're in a boarding house, you have to do an evening duty. And obviously for those with a family, that could be quite challenging, whether you're a man or a woman. And it's just kind of about that support that exists outside of it. For my sort of literature review, I'm kind of taking a Marxist and sort of a feminist approach here, looking at the sort of sociology of gender and how that might develop. Again, I'm sort of reworking that, and it's only in its drafting stages, and kind of looking at sort of the fact that women might be less represented in managerial positions. So for my methodology, what I did is I had an anonymous survey monkey with 10 questions. I sent it out to all staff. And I had about 70 responses, which was, I thought, quite good considering that people are very busy and other commitments. Our sort of intranet, or as you like, sort of the way that we kind of disperse information is a company called Firefly. Basically, we can set tasks for boys to do homework and things like that. So I set a task for the staff to fill it out and access to the link. And then also, once I've had response from that, a Firefly task asking whether they would like to participate in an interview, focus group, both or neither. And obviously I know that people are very busy. I was supposed to only really do maximum 8 interviews. I ended up doing 20 interviews just because it was quite interesting. I wanted to hear what people had to say. Was I missing something? It was a really good way of me to kind of embed myself in the school a bit more as well and get to know a few people. With that, I had to kind of summarise what each interview was saying, and so I had a kind of holistic view, a spectrum of where people sat dealing with this sort of issue. And I had to then map out the sort of 6 most relevant ones that I thought were specific to my research questions. I struggled a little bit because what I found was that I was kind of getting carried away with other issues in the school. I suppose in a survey monkey, if it's anonymous, people can post their opinions. We've got a bring your own device rule at the moment, and people are kind of, there's a bit of controversy over that. So I had to kind of put that to one side. Another thing that was coming to light was the perception was very positive of female staff. teaching staff, but not necessarily support staff. So your matrons, cleaners, caretakers, and not necessarily a gender issue. It was more sort of the role that they were playing and the disparity between the teaching part of the school and the support staff element of it from both the boys and the teaching members of staff. And I hadn't really realised there was much of a barrier. But again, that's not my sort of my research question, so I have to kind of put that to the side. I've transcribed those 6 interviews, and I extracted some keywords from the comment boxes on SurveyMonkey. And those keywords have helped me to kind of code the themes within the transcriptions. So it's sort of inductive. I had the words there, coded it against the material, the transcriptions, and then also looked for other themes within that and kind of merged them together. And again, still in the process of designing this, but I'll talk you through a couple of the things that have come to light in the next couple of slides. So trying to make sure my 3 research questions were in mind, and with also those, to hopefully have approximately 9 themes for each question if it works out. The six interviews, one of these was like a little mini focus group, that's why I'm sort of 8 people listed on there. The 6 to 8 people that I chose to transcribe the interviews for, I tried to make sure there was a range of sort of stages of being at the school, both new, established, and also where they were on sort of like a leadership panel or have some sort of responsibility. I had a pastoral leader, middle manager, senior leadership team member, a head department who's been there for a while, and also a teacher who's quite established, but again, not necessarily new, so on the male perspective. Female perspective, the limit I could go to was the head department. There's no one on the female side who exceeds that level. So I had a relatively new head of department and one that's been there for a while, and then 2 new female teachers based on their experiences of teaching at other schools and how they'd embedded themselves in this environment, how they found it. I was kind of limited by people who volunteer for interviews. I think a lot of people who responded to the survey as well are thinking quite progressively about this kind of issue, and so that's partly why possibly some of the material is quite positive. I'm aware that people haven't responded and they might deem it to be frowned upon to have certain opinions, so therefore will voice them, and they might not voice them to me of all people, especially if I'm new. My positionality, yeah, again, I'm new, I'm female, I'm a relatively new, recent member of staff, and it's sometimes hard to access people not knowing sort of the ins and outs of a new environment. My inductive themes, like I said to you before, were extracted from the SurveyMonkey, such as the word tradition. My deductive themes were derived from my interviews, so changing, old guard, people, feminism, and I sort of cross-matched to make sure that I was trying to have a holistic view of all those things. So what did I find out? So the first one, how a female staff perceived by male colleagues in management. There was a big reference to the number of female staff, the kind of stark contrast and juxtaposition when they walk into an environment such as a senior leadership meeting with housemasters, the deputy head, the head, and so on. There are no female staff. Heads of department meeting, you have approximately 20 heads of department, 17 of them men, 3 women. Again, stark contrast there. And people kept mentioning the numbers of female staff in the school. The perceptions of commitment, the fact that because some of them are part-time, there are male members who are part-time, but a lot of the female staff are too, and the fact that they're not necessarily on the sports field, so the boys and the staff don't see them contributing as such, even though they might be doing other things in different departments. For instance, I know one who is full-time, who doesn't do the sporting stuff. She does sort of entrance tests and interviews and access to to other schools in the area. People sort of said, oh, there's hardly, from the SurveyMonkey, a couple of things that came out. Women are omitted from something called pub duty, so basically another thing, for a week, once a year, you have to do a duty where it's either each day, it's either break time, lunchtime, walking around school, checking pubs off school, and the perception that this one does happen at 9 PM at night. The perception that women are omitted from it because they might be vulnerable and things like that, when actually, realistically, they should be doing it, and they do it, but the staff have obviously thought that it was just never appropriate for women. One of the heads of department who joined about 23 years ago, female, it stipulated that she had to wear a skirt, she wasn't allowed to wear trousers, and one of the first female members of staff in the 70s, she wasn't invited to stuff. So there's this hangover, and they're slow to change, although things are a lot more positive now. Challenges and difficulties experiencing in that environment: rapport with the boys. A member of staff, the head department, who's been there 4 years, she joined with a male member of staff in the language department, and she noticed that at the same time, starting at the same time, he had much more of a rapport with the boys than she did, and she had to really work hard. There's different personalities, different ways of teaching, of course, but she noticed it as a stark contrast, and kind of took on the fact that it was because she was female that she might not have that rapport. And there's a similar one with the head department of 23 years. She said she joined again with a male member of staff, and again he got invited to things, house lunches, and she didn't, and she definitely noticed that kind of disparity there. Family commitments and the sort of whether it's compatible with the school. People have sort of said during term time you live and breathe what's going on there, and you get slightly longer holidays, and that's your time to relax. You have a kind of a community feel, I suppose, in the school, which is great, but it also means that your family are kind of drawn into that a bit. The supposed commitment of full-time is 6 days a week, so including Saturdays, 2 terms of sport and an evening duty. And this is a quote from one of the female members of staff, the head department of 4 years. It's famine or feast with me. During term time I'm never there, and then the holidays I'm always around. I don't know how sustainable it is with 2 parents working full-time in a school like this. So there's a lot of commitment asked of you, and particularly female staff were feeling that kind of guilt between being parents and also making sure that they were contributing in school life. And that could be a potential barrier to women progressing up the leadership scale. To what extent can the challenging of social attitudes and practices around gender lead to successful cultural change in the school? So a couple of words that came up was sort of word changing. The idea that I thought this was quite a good quote. We're a big ship moving slowly in the right direction. There are elements to suggest that the school is being progressive, but it takes time for that to happen. We have an established staff body who've been there for a significant period of time. Again, we talk about setting your ways, and obviously it's a great place to work. There are lots of opportunities. We lowered the average sort of staff room age by quite significantly, which was kind of refreshing in the same way that we were all sort of keen, young, newly qualified teachers. And you can kind of see that actually there's more established members, they're sort of fading, they're becoming in the minority now. And people refer to this old guard, the fact that they've been there sort of 20, 30 years, reluctant to change, gradually sort of moving on, gradually retiring, and the school is becoming a bit more progressive in many ways. But still not necessarily reflective of society, and still behind other schools in a couple of issues there. Possible conclusions. I generally had a very positive experience doing this actually. I felt that I was shedding some light on some of the things that were working really well within the school, and actually there wasn't a lot of negativity to it. It was more just about understanding where they'd come from and what was taking place there. Was there anything that we could do to make sure that we could kind of move with the times a bit more? Overall, women are viewed generally quite positively by individuals and by boys. We're slowly progressing, but a work-life balance for everyone is necessary, and I'm very much aware that I've kind of ignored the the father element of this, the fact that with an enhanced maternity package, that's kind of a positive discrimination support for a woman. But with shared parental leave, we've just had an art teacher take shared parental leave, and actually his package means that he can't afford the accommodation that he's in. But the school's argument is that because we have so many male members of staff, if everyone were to take paternity leave or shared parental leave, then we wouldn't have a holiday. But we should realistically, there are people who've already had their families who aren't going to go on paternity leave, and there are those people who aren't there yet. So it definitely is an issue to be looked at, and I think they're discussing it in the Pay and Conditions Committee very soon. Cultural change is happening with the senior management team, and I think they do want to push things, but it's making sure the staff are on board too. And I feel like there are some staff who are a bit more sort of resistant to that kind of change, and they've got their own reasons for that. And it's interesting to say that you want to get the staff on board, the senior management team on board, as long as they can drive the force. And I feel like they are here, but they don't have enough people behind them to go with them. So it's interesting like how you can find connections between different schools and the setup of them. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.